Well, hello everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Dennis Fansett and I'm from the Diocese of Newcastle Generous Giving Team. Now, on 3 occasions in my life, I've been inside a building when the fire alarm has gone off. On 2 of those occasions, fortunately, it turned out to be a false alarm. But once it was a real fire. There had been some kind of kitchen explosion, the power went off, a few people were injured, though fortunately it turned out nothing serious. But I joined the hundreds of others, indeed for a large office block it could be thousands of others, filing down the stairs in the darkness and through the fire escapes, not knowing at that stage what had happened or indeed what was happening. And as we were doing that, we noticed a small group of people who were walking the other way. As we left the building, these other people were walking in, and they were, of course, the firefighters, grim-faced but determined, not knowing what they might find. They passed us, going in the opposite direction to everyone else. They were walking into danger. How much danger? They didn't know at that stage, and they were doing it essentially to save us. They were walking in to help us walk out. Now, the passage we heard earlier from 1 Timothy chapter 6 is essentially an appeal from Paul to Timothy to likewise walk the other way and to encourage those who Timothy is leading to do so as well. You see, society as a whole puts its trust in money, having it, trying to keep hold of what we have, seeking to get more when we can. That's natural. And the way the world is, and for many of us, that's kind of the way we live. But Paul says, don't live like that. In fact, he says, flee from that way of thinking. It's strong words. And he says, do the opposite. Well, what is the opposite to trying to keep the little money you have? Well, the opposite is to give it away. And that's what Paul is telling us to do. He's telling us to be generous, the opposite to everyone else, walking the other way. Now, there can be no doubt that at the moment we are in a cost of living crisis. I feel actually I need to make that point a little bit stronger. We're in a serious and significant cost of living crisis. It's hurting, and it's going to hurt all of us. The fire alarm is sounding loud and clear, and our natural expected response is to leave the building, to cling on to what we have, to cut back on everything we can, to cut back on charitable donations and to cut back on giving to our local church. And I'm sure that that's what a lot of people would think. But Paul says, no, he says, don't think like that. Don't live like that. Instead, he says, pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Be rich in good deeds and be generous and willing to share. Now, last week I was rereading the account of the widow who put her 2 small coins into the offering bowl. You know the story, you'll find it in Mark 12 verses 41 to 43. But as I read it this time round, 6 small words jumped out at me which I'd never really noticed before. Jesus says that the woman had given all she had to live on. What does that mean? All she had to live on? That means she gave her food money, her heating money, if you like, her electricity and her gas money. But why is Paul so certain that this way of life, going in the opposite direction to everyone else, is right for Timothy and the people he is leading, and therefore right for us? Maybe it's because of his own experience of learning how to live and to be content in God, both when things were going well and during really difficult times when he had nothing, which he writes about in Philippians chapter 4, verse 12. Or maybe it's by that time he had heard the words that Jesus himself prayed, which John records in John chapter 17 of his gospel, verses 13 to 16, where Jesus talks about being in the world, but not of the world. That means we share the same pain as the society we live in. We're not exempt. The cost of living crisis is affecting us, and it will affect us. We are in this along with everyone else, but we're not of the world. We don't share its values. We have a different way of thinking, a different way of responding. Our calling is not to put our hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put our hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Or maybe it's because Paul knew that Jesus himself had already done exactly the same. When this world stood condemned with no hope, Jesus gave up the security of his glory and his majesty, and he walked right in. He came into this world, into our world, in order that we might be saved. But in our passage from 1 Timothy, I believe the clue as to why we are called to behave differently is actually summed up in verse 11, where Paul writes, "But you, Timothy, man of God." Now read the passage again, but this time substitute your own name instead of Timothy's. Man of God, woman of God. That's why we behave in a different way. That's why we walk in the opposite direction to everyone else. We're people of faith. We are people who choose to live our lives by different values. I wish I could have grabbed hold of those determined looking firefighters walking into our building as we walked out. I wish I could have said, "Hey, it's okay, this is only a little fire, you're going to be all right." But the truth is, I didn't know, not at that point anyway, and I certainly didn't know where their next shout might be after they had finished at our building and what sort of dangers they might have in the rest of their day. What I did know was that they were people who had chosen a job, a lifestyle, if you like, of putting public safety, public protection over and above their own security and well-being. Now, my appeal to us as people of faith is, will we do the same? Whatever our parish or benefice's mission is, whatever our way of reaching our community, whatever our way of reaching the world around us, it does need our financial support. So will we walk in? Will we be generous? Dare I say it, will we value caring for others around us more highly, or at least as highly, as our own personal comfort and well-being? When everyone else is cutting back, could we give more? But, you know, I cannot tell you what to give. I cannot tell you the extent to which you should be generous. I cannot tell you not to cut back if that is what is the right thing for you to do. What I can say is that for those of us who count ourselves as people of faith, our calling is different. Our values are different. Our job is to walk in when everyone else is walking out. So, do be generous. Walk the other way. Hold tight to different values. In this way, let's lay up treasure for ourselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that we too may take hold of the life that is truly life. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you.